I'm Joseph Guggenheim. I'm a 1972 medical school graduate. It's unfortunate that we couldn't get together for Alumni Weekend this year. It's always a great opportunity to renew old friendships and to make new ones, but hopefully we'll get together next year. I am going to give a presentation on who's who in the Northwestern neighborhood, and which will highlight the biographies of about 12 people whose names we see around Streeterville and the Northwestern campus. With the aid of Dan today from Alumni Relations, we're going to have a preview of this presentation. So Dan, first slide, please. So the name of the talk is Who's Who in the Northwestern Neighborhood. Next slide, please. I'm sure we all will recognize this iconic building as the Ward Building for the medical school. It was dedicated in 1926, named after Aaron Montgomery Ward. Ward was the pioneer in the mail order business long before Joseph Sears of Sears and Roebuck and Amazon. Ward dropped out of school when he was only 14 years old. He went to work in a barrel stave factory for 25 cents a day, and then went to work in a brick kiln for 30 cents a day. He said this was a very educational experience. This taught him that he was not equipped for physical labor. He moved to Chicago in 1865 to seek his fortune and went to work for the retail firm of Field, Palmer, and Leiter. Field as in Marshall Field. Field would be his employer for 2 years and then later become his bitter enemy. Ward went out on his own after 2 years with Field, Palmer, and Leiter, but Ward's business was burned down in the fire of 1871. He went back into business with his future brother-in-law, George Thorne. Ward and Thorne pooled their money together. They had $2,400 and they opened Montgomery Ward and Company. Thorne is the namesake behind Thorne Hall, the building which was at Superior and Lakeshore Drive, later replaced by the Rubloff building. Next slide, please. What a lot of people don't realize that Ward was not only a retail giant, but he fought for many years to preserve the lakeshore. He didn't want Chicago's lakeshore to end up like Milwaukee or Cleveland, with factories and warehouses along the lake. He was a self-described guardian of the lake who wanted to keep it forever clear with playgrounds, athletic fields, and concert venues for the people of Chicago to enjoy. His enemy in this campaign was Marshall Field, who wanted to put a museum right in the middle of the park. Ward thought this was simply a museum to glorify Field. He fought him in and out of court for many years. Ward finally won because Field died in 1906 and Ward outlived him. Next slide, please. Ward's office building was right at the edge of Grant Park at the corner of Michigan Avenue and Madison. The address is 6 North Michigan. From this office building, Ward had an unobstructed view of the lake and Grant Park. The building was built in 1899. At the time, it was the tallest building in Chicago at 394 feet. It had a pyramid with an observatory on the top, which was a tourist attraction. The pyramid and observatory are gone, but it is now 119 luxurious condos. It's interesting that 80 years after he built this building with an observatory, the retail giant Sears Roebuck built the tallest building in Chicago with an observatory that became a tourist attraction. Next slide, please. There really was somebody named Passavant, whose name is attached to Passavant Memorial Hospital, where a lot of us did our clerkships. The hospital went up in 1929. William Passavant was a Lutheran pastor. He was born in Pennsylvania. His family was from Germany. They immigrated to Pennsylvania due to the Napoleonic Wars and religious persecution. Passavant built several institutions around the eastern United States and Midwest, institutions for the epileptics, orphans, and the elderly, as well as several hospitals. William Ogden Chicago's first mayor, convinced Passavant to build a hospital in Chicago, which he did at the corner of Dearborn and Ontario in 1865. The hospital burned down in 1871 in the fire. It was regarded as a dreaded source of contagion by the neighbors who opposed the hospital. The fire burned the hospital to the ground. Passavant sold the hospital and the property at Dearborn and Ontario for $1.50. On this corner now is a breakfast restaurant named Experience, where you can't even buy a cup of coffee for $1.50. Passavant rebuilt another hospital called Emergency Hospital in 1885 at the corner of Dearborn and Superior. This hospital was in close to the police station, rail yards, and factories, so it took care of a lot of trauma. This hospital was demolished, and the final Passavant Memorial Hospital went up in 1929, later demolished to make way for Northwestern Memorial Hospital in 2001. Next slide, please. Lurie Children's Hospital is named to honor the generosity of Anne and Robert Lurie. Anne said that her mother told her that she should do a good deed daily, and this is the philosophy she tried to live her life by. She's a self-described hippie at heart. She moved to Chicago in 1973 and was a critical care nurse at the old Children's Memorial Hospital on Fullerton. She met her future husband, Bob, in the elevator of their apartment at the Sandburg Village. They were on their way to do laundry. They struck up a conversation because they noticed they both had something in common: keychains to British cars. Hers was a Triumph, his was an MG. He asked her to help him sort his laundry. She thought maybe he was just trying to find out if she was a helpful lady. They got married in 1977 and had 6 children. Unfortunately, he developed terminal colon cancer and died in 1990. Next slide, please. 4 days after after Bob was buried, one of the children developed salmonella septicemia from eating a tainted piece of chicken. The prognosis was dire, but the doctors at Children's Memorial saved the child. The hospital officials approached Anne about making a donation to expand the hospital on Fullerton. She held out her donation until they agreed to build a new hospital in the medical center. After they agreed, she donated $100 million to build this hospital, one of the largest gifts in the history of Northwestern. She's a very hands-on person. She visited the hospital frequently during the construction. She was on a first-name basis with the construction supervisor, who adopted her vegan lifestyle, and he lost 20 pounds during the construction. The hospital is named to honor Bob and Anne's generosity. You rarely ever see a picture of Anne when she is not smiling. She is definitely someone who enjoys what she is doing. She has said that some people think of philanthropy as hovering in a helicopter, throwing money out. But she said philanthropy, the word really means loving one's fellow man. Truly an amazing lady. Well, I hope you'll come to the presentation next year. I hope we can all get together on the campus for Alumni Weekend, and I look forward to seeing everyone then. In the meantime, if you're bored with watching old Northwestern football games on YouTube and Big Ten Network, I have some reading suggestions for you. Then and Now, Chicago by Kathleen McGuire. Great book with pictures of current buildings, but it shows when they were built many years ago and their current pictures. Chicago Flashback, which is published by the Tribune. It's got short 5 to 8 page vignettes on many stories about the history of Chicago, sports, politics, whatever you can think of. The Plan of Chicago by Carl Smith. This little book is about Daniel Burnham's plan for making Chicago the city beautiful. He wanted to make it like Paris or Washington, D.C. A lot of his plans were never implemented, although many of them were, including the Riverwalk, which is just now being built. he never envisioned that Chicago would be crossed by interstate expressways. Northwestern University by Jay Pridmore. This book is mostly about the Evanston campus, but also about the Chicago campus. It is a very comprehensive history of the campus of the school, dating back to its founding in 1850. Encyclopedia of Chicago, edited by Grossman et al., published by the Chicago History Museum. You can open this book anywhere and start reading, and it's a fascinating book about Chicago. And Building Chicago by Zukowski. It's a beautiful coffee table book, but the text is very interesting and informative. Well, thanks for joining us today, and I hope we can all get together next year at Alumni Weekend. Thanks for tuning in.